Hello everyone, welcome to our Analysis 1. Our group consists of Eli Musselwhite, Ryan Mugen, Aiden Toomey, and Christo Payne. In this presentation, we'll walk you through how we conducted a controlled ransomware experiment, what tools and safety precautions we used, and how digital forensics principles guided every part of our process. Ransomware is one of the most destructive forms of cybercrime today. It's malware that logs or encrypts the victim's data, network, or entire system until a ransom is paid. Modern ransomware isn't a simple click and infect threat anymore. It has many layers to its attack. First, attackers gain initial access. Then they may do things such as escalate privileges, move laterally within networks, steal your data, or finally just encrypt everything. Our goal is to safely reproduce and study this process in a lab using WannaCry. WannaCry is very popular and well known, and that makes it well documented. WannaCry is mainly known for spreading itself automatically, so this made it pretty easy for us to run it in an isolated VM and helped us with our research to conduct our forensic analysis. Our experiment took place entirely within an isolated virtual environment. We used Windows 11 ARM running on Apple Silicon through the Parallels process. We disabled clipboard sharing, file sharing, and internet access to prevent anything on the outside escaping the VM. Our analysis platform was CAPE, which is an advanced version of the Cuckoo sandbox. CAPE allowed us to observe file changes, monitor process, watch network traffic, and capture memory data. We specifically chose WannaCry because it's heavily studied, making it easier to validate our findings against reliable documentation and known behavior. So for out-of-scope sources, certain components were intentionally left out to maintain safety. We didn't want any live internet egress or lateral movement because connecting WannaCry to the internet could have infected the host or maybe even your personal computer. We also excluded full disk imaging for every run, as this would have generated large data volumes without adding much insight. Finally, we didn't include firmware level or cloud-based logs since they don't apply to our VM since it's ran locally and we're removing everything from talking to this VM from the outside. And by doing that, we stayed safe while collecting only the relevant forensic evidence.
Goals of acquisition. Our experiment had four main goals. First, identify exactly what processes the ransomware executed. Second, document how it altered the file system. This includes which files it encrypted, created, or deleted. Third, check whether it tried to communicate over the network. And finally, connect all of those behaviors into a coherent, time-based narrative. Each of these goals reflects real-world forensic priorities, understanding what happened, how it happened, and when it happened. These are all things that we wanted to focus on collecting during the investigative process. Evidence sources. To accomplish our goals, we gathered four major evidence types: Sysmon and Windows event logs, which track process creation and system activity. These also capture RAM images and disk artifacts, which store extremely important volatile information. These types will allow us to see in-memory artifacts, ransom notes, or any modified directories. Packet captures will show us any outbound connection attempts. Remember that these are disabled, but WannaCry will still attempt connections despite them being disabled. All of this data allows us to receive the full view of what the ransomware is doing and how it is acting on the virtual machine. Procedure: execution and artifact collection. We started every run by resetting the virtual machine to a clean state, which guarantees there are no leftovers from previous tests. We checked the system clock and made sure Sysmon was logging correctly so that our timestamps would match up later. On the host computer, we ran Wireshark to capture all network activity. Because the virtual machine was isolated, any network packet we saw was guaranteed to come from the ransomware itself, and no other source. Once everything was ready, we staged the WannaCry sample, verified its hash to confirm it hadn't changed, and then executed it inside the guest machine. While the ransomware was running, we watched for the first signs of encryption or suspicious activity. At a specific trigger point, we suspended the virtual machine and saved a complete snapshot of its memory. That memory file was later pulled from the Parallels package for analysis. After that, we exported the Sysmon logs, stopped the network capture, and collected disk evidence like ransom notes in folders that had been modified. By the end, we had a detailed set of data showing exactly what the ransomware did at every step along the way.
Validation. We wanted to make sure the whole process was reliable and repeatable. So before running any malware, we did a dry run with a harmless test file to check that all of our tools worked correctly. We also created a baseline list of files and hash values for comparison, which made it easy to see which ones were changed once WannaCry was executed. We repeated this setup the same each time or trial to reduce random differences in the likelihood of unwanted data that we did not take into account. This level of consistency helped us produce trustworthy and comparable results that we can use in our analysis to provide the best picture possible. For this experiment, we collected 3 distinct categories of evidence to build a complete picture of the attack. First, we captured host-based logs, primarily using Sysmon. These logs were critical as they gave us a high-resolution, time-stamped view of every process that was created and every file that was written to the disk by the malware. Secondly, we ran a continuous network capture using Wireshark on the VM's isolated adapter. This PCAP file allowed us to analyze any and all network communications that the malware attempted, from DNS queries to any potential phoning home. And finally, we collected the artifacts created by the malware itself, the ransom note, the decryption GUI, and the modified desktop wallpaper. These items show the direct, user-facing impact of the attack and confirm its intent. From the evidence we collected, we had several key findings. First, we confirmed that the malware's use of masquerading. The initial file was disguised as Microsoft's utility named diskpart. This is a classic tactic to gain the user's trust. Second, the logs revealed a clear 2-stage execution. The masqueraded dropper wasn't the ransomware itself. Its only job was to write the real payload, a file named task.sche.exe, to a temp folder and then launch it. The second process is what performed all of the destruction actions. Third, the malware's intent was explicit. It immediately displayed the ransom note and the wanted decryptor GUI, confirming its purpose as ransomware. And finally, the most importantly, our network capture proved that the sample can operate fully offline. It never attempted to contact its kill switch domain or any command and control servers. This is a critical finding because it means that once it's ran, simply unplugging the computer will not stop the encryption. It's also likely that these network features might have been removed in the research version of the virus we were using. The evidence timelines puts the whole single attack into a correlated timeline. At 19:42 and 23 seconds, the user executed the initial dropper. Just 1/10 of a second later, that dropper had already written to the main task.che.exe payload file to the disk. 1 second after that, the payload was launched and the encryption process began. And less than a second after that, the ransomware and GUI were already on the user screen. The key takeaway here is the sheer speed of the attack. From the initial user click to full system compromise and data encryption, the entire automated process took less than 2 seconds.
Preserving the data we collected was a top priority. We used a consistent naming convention for every file that included the date, time, and run number, which made it easy to track where each piece of evidence came from. Once the data was saved, we locked the storage drive to make it read-only so nothing could be altered. We also followed the 3-2-1 rule, which means 3 copies of the data on 2 different types of media with 1 copy stored offsite. This is the same approach used by professional forensic investigators to make sure evidence is never lost or tampered with. To protect integrity even further, we hashed every piece of data right after it was collected. Each time a file was copied or moved, we re-verified that hash to confirm it hadn't changed. We also kept a detailed chain of custody document that listed every action taken, who performed it, and when it happened. These steps make sure our process is transparent and defensible, just like it would need to be in a real forensic case. We ran into a few technical issues during this project. One of the biggest was that many forensics tools don't fully support Windows 11 on ARM. For example, we couldn't use FTK Imager to grab memory because of driver incompatibility. We solved that by using the parallel sysn feature, which created a reliable memory file directly from the hypervisor. We also had trouble installing Sysmon because Secure Boot blocked its kernel components. To fix that, we temporarily turned off Secure Boot just for the installation, then turned it right back on and documented what we did. We also ran into other technical challenges, such as the fact that running a full experiment with internet access would pose a risk to the host machine and other networks. To get around this challenge, we maintained host-only networking and captured attempted communication via packet capture, correlating it with Sysmon's timestamps to record data. We also controlled huge data volume using strict naming convention, standardized manifest, and the 3-2-1 preservation plan. Because we were dealing with active malware, safety and ethics were our top priorities. The virtual machine stayed fully isolated at all times. Clipboard sharing, drag and drop, and file sharing were turned off. There was no internet access whatsoever. We documented every step we took and recorded all the tools and versions we used. This made our work transparent and defensible, which is important if you ever need to present findings in a legal or academic setting.